The very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Ferrier podcast, where I will sit down and converse with the superstars, the overachievers, the masters of our craft. Each episode will be a deep dive into their personal philosophies, their habits, the tools they use, and the secrets to not only their success, but overcoming failure as well.
First, find somebody you can mimic, then find somebody you can stand, and then try to focus on one style until you master that style.
So if you say I can't do something, well, you're absolutely right. But if you say you're going to, you're absolutely right with that too.
People say that you shouldn't define yourself by your work. That is not true.
You know what Dave Farley does when he's, lucky enough to be at the World Equestrian Games? I'm watching other people work.
Yeah.
I don't think we do that enough.
This podcast is for all of you out there who share my passion for the job and the desire to always improve. These interviews will put you in touch with the inner workings of the role models we all want to emulate. So let's get to it.
There's only so many hours in a day, and it's a matter of what you do with them.
Welcome, everyone. First, I wanted to say that my last episode with Jason Fox seemed to have really struck a nerve with a lot of people. I received a lot of messages because of that one. And it sounds like a lot of you are in agreement with most of what Jason was saying. And as usual, Jason just said out loud what a lot of people had been thinking. I'm sure a lot more conversation will come out of that one. Today's guest is none other than Nigel Fennell AWCF. Mark Hickcox kindly sent the podcast mic on to Nigel after our conversation. As I expected, we had a great chat, and I left our conversation feeling quite inspired by Nigel. You will notice a continuous theme in his story, one of sacrifice and investing in himself. I then realized that this has been a theme of many of the stories guests have told. Pretty much all of the people in this trade that we look up to have had to make this calculation and decided to forfeit any semblance of work-life balance for a time to learn and practice the skills needed to get to the top of their game and achieve their career goals. As the saying goes, nothing worthwhile comes without sacrifice. Life is all about trade-offs, and unfortunately we are restricted by many things, not the least of which is time. If you have lofty career goals yourself, I hope that at least one of the guests, if not more, has inspired you and shown you how it can be done, even with seemingly insurmountable obstacles. If raising your young children seems like an obstacle, listen to Elisa Miller or Lori McBride's episodes. If you feel like you don't have enough time, listen to Cody or Chris Gregory's episodes. If you failed at your goal once or twice and are hesitant to try again, listen to Mark Hickcox. And if you don't think you can afford it financially, listen to both of Andrew DeVisser's episodes, and he will help you lay the financial groundwork to make a plan and see it through. These are only a few examples of many, but you get my point. All this said, please don't interpret this as me promoting an unhealthy work-life balance. Most of the folks I just mentioned only did this for a time. Eventually, they turned to focusing on achieving a work-life balance, only now armed with some credentials or bragging rights or an enviable client list that often made this a lot easier. Anyway, as you will hear, Nigel's years of commitment to improving his skills at the cost of making more money have found him where he is today, well-positioned to teach those skills and make the next generation of farriers better for it. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. So I've been a fan in the background on Facebook, watching your work over the years. You post some beautiful shoes. And then I saw the struggle that you and your wife had to get to the U.S. with the whole visa process. I remember your post about your first attempt, they rejected you?
That's right. Yeah, it was a very dark time in our lives, without a doubt. We were coming on an E2 visa originally, which is like an investment visa.
I know, I actually have that visa myself.
You have that, yeah, well, you know all about it. Business plan and the whole deal, and we bought the house and the cars and everything else that went with it. And then, cut a long story short, we got to the embassy and they denied it.
Wow.
So we were stuck with the house, couldn't get to it, and then they ban you from the States because you've been rejected a visa.
Right.
I got rid of 2/3 of my work because the lawyer said it'll be fine. So then I was, what are we going to do now?
Wow.
So yeah, I mean that was a tough time.
Now, what did you do? How did you reapply?
So what we did was we tried to sell the house and we tried to sell the trucks. Couldn't do any of it. Nothing was selling. I was paying a mortgage on a house that I couldn't get to.
Oh, nightmare.
My wife's parents kindly, they had a building at the end of their land that they converted into living, so we had somewhere to be.
Okay.
2 years before, I'd gone through a divorce, and I'd sold the house and wasn't on the housing ladder in the UK because it was all about moving to America. So I was renting somewhere, and eventually after the fail, they had this place done up. We moved in there, and that's where we lived for 2 years in this tiny, tiny little apartment. But they saved our skin because, we couldn't afford 2 mortgages, and
No
so
kidding.
that's where we were. So then it still didn't sit good with me. It was we never got a definitive answer from the embassy. We got a generic answer, and it just didn't ring true with me. So I couldn't leave it, and I said to Suze, we need to speak to another lawyer to put a lid on it. I still haven't had closure. We've lost so much money,
Mm-hmm.
and I need closure. So anyway, we spoke to 2 lawyers in the States. She saw our plans and all the rest of it, and she said, yeah, your lawyer screwed up your financial forecast investment sheet.
Oh,
So it was a red
man.
flag to the consular officer. We weren't to know.
Right.
So then we gave it to another lawyer who was actually, because our sponsors, and still are at the time, because I was originally meant to be working at the Kentucky Horseshoeing School
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay.
for the first time around, because Mitch Taylor was in Qatar. He had a contract there for a couple of years. Sam was leaving, Sam Gooding. Anyway, obviously that never came. So Sarah at the school said, look, speak to Leia. My niece is an immigration lawyer. She might be able to help you out. So the previous lawyer said, don't go near the embassy for 8 or 9 months with any type of visa or reapplication because they'll just turn you down. That's what they do, no matter how good it is.
Right.
She did say the place is like this cloak and dagger shit with the embassies. They just, don't go there. So we didn't. We left it. And then in 2019, August time, we got hold of Leia in New Orleans. She looked at everything and she came back with the same thing. She said, yeah, your financial investment sheet, the lawyer screwed it up. Too many red flags. Just in the Trump administration, 5 years ago, it would have been fine. But now it wouldn't have been good enough. But you weren't to know.
Right. Yeah.
There were several things on there. Why wasn't the house on the investment sheet? And I said, because she said we couldn't have it on there. And she said, yes, you can. You just have to do it in your own name, not the business name, and it can be part of your business expenditure towards the plan.
Right. Of course.
So you lost out massive amount of money. Anyway, she was aware of what I'd done in Farrowing. She said, I think you'll be eligible for this O1 visa. O1, people of extraordinary abilities, they call it. Can you send me everything you've done in the last 30 years? So we did. We sent her everything. Magazine, articles, awards, the whole thing.
That's
And
awesome.
she said, yeah, we're going to go for the O1. So that's what we did. We went for the O1 and we had to have references and petitioners from here, from associations to say who they knew I was and what I meant to Farrowing and all that and all the rest of it. So with support from the US and some very kind people, that finished the petition off and she submitted it and it was accepted. And we went to the embassy on the 12th of March and we were ready to leave in the April last year. We got to the embassy on the 12th of March. They grilled me for 30 minutes, stamped it, said yes, it's been fine. And then 2 days later, Trump shut the borders because of COVID, so we were stuck again.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
You were like, so what is going on? So then there was a meltdown. It was like, well, now what? Because you got your visa stamped, and we were very lucky. I know I moan about it now, but if we waited another week, there wouldn't have been no appointments because the embassy's all shut down.
Right. Wow.
Because of COVID. So we literally got in the last week, although we couldn't get to the States, we'd had our passports taken from them. They put the page of the visa in and then sent it to us. The week after, we would have been stuck for months without, and then try to get another appointment. It just would have been a nightmare. So then we basically went through the summer, got to late July, August. I said, we need to come up with a plan how to get there. And that's when Susie did some homework. And the only country that was not in the Trump proclamation was Turkey. So we basically spoke to the shipping company, filled up the shipping container, including the sculptures, on the 29th of September, kissed it goodbye, went off to America, and then we flew to Turkey on the 4th of October, spent 2 weeks there in isolation to break the cycle, and flew to Atlanta from Istanbul.
Wow. If there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, we were crapping ourselves.
No kidding.
You know, what can you do? But there we are. So that was that. We made it. We did a 7-hour drive from Atlanta in a hire car to the house, and we hadn't seen the house for 2.5 years. So when we pulled up to the gate, it was quite an emotional experience to suddenly see the house.
No kidding.
And everything you'd invested in was there. Yeah, it was quite emotional. But you have to get on with your lives. If you don't take these, it's hard. It's easy to say now, but I didn't want to look back in years to come and think, I wish I'd tried that again.
Right. Yeah. What was the push to move to the US in the first place?
I'd done a lot of competing here and a lot of clinics and given a lot of clinics and judging and things. And I fell in love with the States. I fell in love with the space. I'd been through a divorce in my mid-40s, and it was a good opportunity to create a new chapter.
Yeah.
And, like it or not, and many men and women have been through it. When you go through a divorce and you split all your money, you don't have a lot of money left. And I knew the money I had left for property would go further in America than it would in England.
Right.
I could never get the land I'd always wanted in England, and the shop. I'd never had a shop on my own property. And in your mid-40s, starting again, and you're off the housing ladder with your reduced work, I'd never get back on the housing ladder again, and I'd be in some tiny condo in a town that I didn't want to be in.
Yeah.
And I just thought, that's not me for the rest of my days, that there's something else. We were on 11 acres with a beautiful house and a shop that I'd always dreamed of. If you pick this up and dropped it in Farnham in Surrey, it'd cost you $3 million.
Right. Yeah.
It was a case of, is this the last go? So that was why we did it. And I have a lot of friends here, so it was worth it. And our next phase is the green card, and we need to fight that, not fight it, but, I'm a professional, and Leia's very kindly going to take it on and said, you need longevity. So the O1 is a stepping stone to the green card, and you need to capitalise on it because they've already recognised you as a professional. So that's the next thing. So that's our next chapter, is to try and go that route.
Okay. And I read through your list of clinics that you have. Like you seem to have one every single weekend. It's incredible. Are you hosting those at your house now?
Yeah, we do. We did. Winter was busy. Yeah, the house. Yeah, all at the house. We were very busy up until about end of April, and then we put all the summer ones up. But everyone's busy. It's a new entity. To come here as an Englishman to give post-education to guys already on the road, already shoeing, that just want to, expand their skills. No one's ever done it like this. So we didn't know if it was going to work, so we now know that summertime isn't a time for clinics. People are too busy.
Right.
For the winter time. So we're basically going to run them from October through to the end of April, and then summertime, people are too busy for stuff like that. So, but the idea was to come here, give the postgraduate education. I'd like to have a small round of shoeing. I have no desire to go back to 40 sets a week like I used to in England,
Yeah.
chasing my tail. I'm 31 years into the trade and I have no desire to, and like many guys, to break your back hurtling towards 50.
Right.
And that's when I thought the education with some shoeing and now, if it by failure, the sculptures, they came around purely through failure. That was thanks to the embassy. If we hadn't have failed, I never would have built the sculptures because I had so much time on my hands.
Right.
And I'd always had this hankering in my brain to build a horse one day, like you do. Some men want to, or whatever it is. Whether it was some kind of midlife crisis idea, I don't know. But my new wife said to me, "Hey, why don't you build that horse you always wanted to build?" So that's what I did, and that's how they were born. And then it created something else that I didn't know. So that came out of failure. So sometimes in the darkest of tunnels, there's a glimmer of light.
No kidding. Yeah. And watching you make that online was incredible too. Now, of course, your latest horse that you're working on, it's Secretariat, right?
Yeah, it scares me to death.
Really?
It's all right. The other two guys I built, you do put yourself under pressure because I didn't know how the first one was going to turn out. A farrier friend of mine, Andrew Castley in the UK, I did my practical fellowship exam in 2018, and I went to him as a mentor just to look at my shoes before I went to the exam, as I did with Stephen Bean. And Andrew had a huge, massive pile of rasps, and a massive. And I looked at these rasps. I said, "What are you going to do with those?" He said, "Well, I'm going to throw them." I said, "Can I have them?" He said, "Yeah." "What are you going to do with them?" I said, "I'm going to try and build a horse out with them." And he said, "Well, good luck with that." So I took all the rasps and the files and Magico was born. And that was inspired by a horse, actually. A customer of mine, Elisa Morgan, she had bought a beautiful Andalusian stallion called Magico, and he came in the April of 2018. And I thought, yeah. So I measured him up, and that's what we did. I just made it up as I went along.
Wow.
And Maximus was based off that as well. He was a muscular abstract. And then one day, John Schmidt, a good farrier friend of mine in Tennessee, we messaged each other a lot, and I'd been sending him pictures of the sculptures as I was doing them. And it come to the end of Magico, and he said, "Who are you going to do next?" I said, "I have no idea. I don't know." And he said, "Why don't you do Secretariat?" So I was aware of the name, but I wasn't completely aware of the story. So I YouTubed it and fell in love with it.
Yeah.
It's been an obsession ever since.
Oh, incredible. Now, in the process of making them, I mean, I'm another person who has often thought, "Oh, look at all these scrap shoes I have," and the rasps. Sometime when I get slow, this is something I could do if I have a lull in business or whatever. But I've often, in trying to conceive it, I didn't know where to even start. What did you start with?
So that was tough.
Did you make a frame?
No. When you have no idea what you're doing, when you think of artists that do it professionally, have done it for years, and they've had training and they've got this skilled schematic working out in their brain, I don't have that. So I was just winging it, basically. So I just went from the ground up. I built their feet, I built their legs, I fixed their legs to the stand, and I built it in my brain as a farrier. Quite many people have actually said to me, it was Adrian Devereux who I very kindly took me under his wing. I've known him for 27 years, and when I had nowhere to go, I had no shop because of the fail, he said, "Look, come to my forge, use my place." So used his little forge, and I built Magico, and we got him in the field, and he looked at him and he said to me, "It looks like he's going to blink and he's going to go running around that field." And he said, "He looks like he's going to come alive." And I said, "I think it's just because we're farriers, Adrian. I think we've run our hands down their legs tens of thousands of times.
Right.
And we've stood next to them and we felt the heat in their bodies and the blood in their veins. And we've seen them every single day." I said, "And I just think it's purely, you just turn into a computer and you know where things have to go."
Yeah.
I couldn't draw you a horse, but for some reason, whenever I was laying the metal on, if it didn't feel right, it didn't go there. And then when I put a shape up, it was just weird. It was just something that I had a little bit of a flair for clay when I was at school 34 years ago. I was quite good with clay, but I never did anything with it. I left school and never touched clay ever again. But I did have a hankering. When we used to do beach holidays, I would always, every day, build horses in sand.
Huh.
And I enjoyed building horses' heads in sand. When my daughter was tiny, and I could spend all day building horses' heads in sand. That's all I'd ever did. I never did anything at home, or you never had time, right? You'd be on the beach,
Right.
You're laying there. I could never just lay there, and I'm
Right.
always looking for something to do. So, like, my daughter, come on, Poppy, let's build a horse in the sand.
Little did you know you were training yourself.
No idea at all. Not at all. I fell in love with it. I really did it. My wife, Susie, she can come into that shop. If I do a 4 a.m. start, she'll come in and she'll look at her watch and say, "Are you coming in for tea?" And it'll be 7 o'clock at night, and the day's gone by me like that.
Really?
Yeah. It's like, really? Is that time? Yeah, you've done 15 hours. Are you coming in?
And how long do you think it took you to do the first one?
So Magico took me 564 hours.
Wow.
That was total building time. I took all the hours, but as Susie quite rightly said to me, I can stand in that shop and stare at the sculpture for 3 hours and just look at it. And Suze goes, "You don't put those hours down where you're looking at stuff and figuring it." I said, "No." She said, "So Magico could well be 1,000 hours." I was like, "Well, it could be, but I don't know."
So you only count the time that you physically work on it.
Yeah, but she said, "I've got to start counting the hours where you're figuring," because I don't do drawings. I do measurements. I got in contact with Leonard Lusky at Secretariat.com, and they have the rights to the franchise and the merchandise of Secretariat. I emailed Walker Hancock at Claiborne Farm in Paris, Kentucky, where Secretariat was kept when he finished racing.
Okay.
And he was there as a sire. And I messaged Walker, who is the son of Seth Hancock, who syndicated Secretariat in 73 for, I think it was $7 million. And I just said, "Have you got anything of the statue of Secretariat? I'm building a sculpture. I know it sounds crazy, but I need some kind of measurement." Anyway, he said, "Look, we've got nothing like Secretariat, but why don't you email Leonard Lusky at Secretariat.com? He may have something." I had spoken to Leonard before to let him know I was building this sculpture, and I emailed him and said, "I've contacted Walker at Claiborne. Do you have anything on Secretariat?" Well, within 30 minutes, he sent me a copy of the original sheet of the veterinarian measurements that was taken on Secretariat in 72 and 73.
Oh, amazing.
All his measurements. It was all there, and it was all signed by the veterinary, because they would obviously measure them, and they also weighed them 3 times in their racing career. And it was just weird that the second time Secretariat was weighed was the day I was born. So that was crazy. I've got these measurements, and so I've worked as hard as I can off of those. So there was a lot of time in prepping to get the measurements and the body length, and now he's up on his stand. His legs are hung, his head is on. I'm now starting to build his body cage.
Wow.
So that's another lot of standing and staring, and because once the body cage is done, then obviously I'm going to then cover him in those mosaics,
Okay.
inch by inch.
Right. Wow.
And hopefully, when I've followed the shape, I've got the shape right.
Wow. That is quite the project. And amazing that it came out of that dark time, that's what started it all. It kind of speaks to, I think, a bit of your nature anyways, though, because judging by the shoes that you put out and make, you have obviously spent a lot of time in the shop and a lot of time practicing on the minutia of shoemaking and forging. So where did that begin? How did you develop those skills?
That goes way back to after I qualified in 95. I wanted to get my associate done quite early. I got my associate within 3 years of qualifying. Then I planned on hitting the competition scene very hard. I always had the aspirations of trying to make the England team. That was my goal. So I started competing in 98. I competed a little bit, dabbled, but nothing huge. And then 98 I started, and that was it. I was competing every season. it's an extraordinary thing. You're around a lot of incredible guys, and you're watching them, and you practice with them, and also contests that you go to get you ready. I started going to the World Championships and practicing for that develops your skills. What I've learned with contests is that they're a fantastic part of the backbone of your inertia to move steel, but the preparation is what gets you there. It's preparing, because no matter what happens at that contest, win, lose, draw, fail, you've already won because you've put in 2-3 months before. When you come to the next show, that's 6 weeks on from that, the preparation you did for that competition carries you through to your next prep without you even realizing.
Right.
Early on, I was thinking, I've done all this practice. I've come away, I've had a bad show. I've come away with no ribbons, and you're pissed off. And then as the years went on, I started to realize nothing has been wasted, because that has kept building me all the time, the preparation, the practice. And then when I've got to the contest, you start getting the ribbons and things start happening. That's amazing. But I know the stronger you get, the stronger your preparation is for the next time. And that's, I think, how you develop as a forger. And not only that, but, I have a huge respect for Stephen Bean. He's been a great friend to me. And I worked with him, in the mid-2000s. And to work with somebody very closely who's incredible, they make you dig deep. I could never have dug as deep as I did without him. Beanie can do things in a heat that many people can't. And he's incredible. I mean, his detail in forging and the power and his execution in class structure, timing, understanding where you should be, your heats. And he's got it all figured out. And being around that, that's what got me on the England team. That's what got me on teams in Calgary. And, he was a massive part of that. Along with other mentors that I've had over the years, Henry Gregory, Adrian Devereaux, and many, many others, many competitors that I've worked alongside and teamed up with. I've only emulated the men I've been around that I've wanted to be like. You're against yourself. I've learned when you compete, you're not against him or her. You're competing against yourself.
Right.
That's the end of it. It's the same with a boxer. He's not competing against that guy in front of him, or he is, but he's got to do the prep. He's competing against himself. He has to be the best that he can be. He can study that man as much as he likes, but until he gets in the arena with him, that's when his preparation comes out. And that's the same with so many things. That's how I look at it. It's just time and preparation. And to get or attain something you've never had, you sometimes have to dig deep and do something you've never done. And you have to go outside the box. And as Craig Trinker has always said, another one of my idols, you're a bad daddy if you don't get out of that box. You have to get out there. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that is pushing yourself. And I think that's what it is. It's just get there, put yourself forward. And I always said that when I took over as coach and manager of the England team, my thing at the trials was all about moving forward. Some guys wouldn't come to the trials because they'd be, oh, well, I'm never going to make the team. Well, no, you won't if you don't come. But there's more to this trial day than just coming to try and get on the team. It's about coming, preparing for it, and watching the men that are there to see what it takes, see the work, and putting yourself forward. Some of you may never make the team. But if you come every year, you'll never know what can happen. I was one of those guys. When I was at the trials in the mid-2000s, 5 years in a row, I was reserve. I was like alternate. I couldn't crack into the team. It drove me nuts. Or I was just outside alternate, and I'd be drafted into the team because one guy couldn't make the competition. Then I started to get some experience. And then when I did another trial, suddenly I started to break in, and then there was no stopping it. So, we all have to start somewhere. But it's about preparation and moving forward. And also a massive deal is making shoes for feet. And that sounds very basic. Of course we make shoes for feet. But, an old mentor of mine, Colin Smith, used to come and give us clinics when I was in my late 20s. And sort of in my early 20s then. And he looked in my truck and he saw a load of keg shoes. And he said to me, they're not going to teach you anything. He said, you need to make all your shoes. I was like, really? Yeah. So he went to my shoe pile and he pulled a shoe out of it. a worn shoe, and he gave me this worn shoe, and he said, "Who's that off?" I don't know. About 4 years later, after I've been making all my shoes day in and day out, we were still having for clinics. He bent down in my new old shoe pile with my handmade shoes, pulled a random shoe out, and he said to me, "Who's that off?" I said, "Oh, well, that's Ebony at Kiln Cottage Stables." He went, "There you go. Now you know your feet."
Huh.
And he was absolutely right. And it was the shoemaking day in and day out that taught me the inertia to understand the horn and the anvil. And it also taught me to remember horses' feet, because I'd make all the shoes for those horses and write their chalk name on their feet. And he would always say to me, the job, boy, he said, is done in here behind this anvil. You're only finishing it off when you go out there.
Right.
He said, you don't want to be out there long. That's what's going to kill you. He said, being in here is your rest time. So understand how to use the anvil. And he was absolutely right. And I owe so much to Colin he said, there'll come a time when you won't want to make shoes anymore. He said, because it breaks us all. He said, but when you do go over to keg shoes, you'll understand what you can get from them and what you can't, and you'll service the feet as best as you can, but you'll always make 20% for the feet that need it. And that's exactly what I did. I'd have 4 or 5 different makes in my truck. I knew what I could get from them. I knew what I couldn't. I knew how to fit them, and then I would make for the feet that really needed it. And he was right.
Wow. So how did you, there's so many questions that come out of just what you've said there. How did you start balancing earning a living and doing all of that practice? And I know there's a huge time commitment with the team. And then obviously you had a family too. How did you make that balance? Or is there a way you can make that balance?
No, I don't know. I don't think there's a very hard balance. I was obsessive with it. It did cause problems at home with my first wife. You know, she put up with it and she knew what it was about. But it was hard, and I don't know how I did it. Making shoes, I just don't know. I just did it. And all the guys that are still doing it, it was difficult. It was difficult. You work all day. You then practice 3 evenings a week, all day Saturday. You get windows of practice or early in the morning. Sometimes I'd be in there very early in the morning. I always remember Schwarzenegger once of his sayings, Arnold would say, there's 24 hours in a day. Don't tell me there's not enough hours. I suggest you sleep faster.
Yeah.
He's about right. Yep. It's very difficult. I don't think there is a thing as balance. You're out all day, you practice, you're either there or you're not. And I wasn't there. I do have regrets, but it's sacrifice. You can't. I never wanted to be the same when I was 50. I didn't want to be qualified and then got to 50 and been the same. Muhammad Ali once said, if someone at 50 thinks the same as they did at 20, they've just wasted 30 years.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that man.
Right.
I wanted to get to 50, which I'm nearly there, and know that I'd done, just for my own soul, that I'd aspired to give it as much as I could. And there is a sacrifice to that. And there's guys out there who have been through it. And you need a very special wife to put up with it. And my first wife, she did. But in the end, we grew apart and it was amicable and it was fine. But we came to the end of our time. But it's just life. If you want to do something that badly and do it that well to see how far you could have taken it, there's no regrets.
Mm-hmm.
I have no regrets as far as that. I have regrets of time and balance but it's just life. You have to embrace it, and just as the next chapter of our lives is coming here, and everyone's got a chapter in them. I love shoeing. I love doing all that. But commercially now, it's over for me. I don't want to be doing out, killing myself 5 days a week, 40 sets a week. I've done that, fortunately, because of the way things have gone.
Yeah, and you've kind of reached this other chapter where you have built up such a skill set that you can pass that along to other people through the education side of things.
There is that. You can't, that chapter takes over. So you're in a position where you can give some help and pass it on. And that was always the intention. It was never to stop. That's why we came here, was to offer the education and the clinics and things like that. So we'll see how that pans out. And I'll always do it. However, well received or not, I'll always put clinics on, and for those that want it, that will always happen. And the sculptures, I'd quite happily carry on and do that and live my days out like that. I think everyone's can be good at something else or find something else. You look at some of the entrepreneurs in the world that have gone from one thing to another to another. I followed, one of my idols as a movie star was Arnold. You look at that guy, I've read his book, and he went from nothing to bodybuilder to world champion several times. While he was doing that, he was a builder. He was building houses. He was buying houses in California, and he made a lot of money through that. And then he was writing books, and then he got into the movies. And he always said that everyone's got different chapters in their lives. Just don't think, once you've come to the end of one, what am I going to do now? Everyone has chapters where they can go through life, whatever it is, and whatever scale it is. It doesn't have to be big. It can be, everyone's got more than one chapter in them.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Now, when you switched over to handmaking everything, was that all concave or 3/4 fullard or a mix? And how did you begin that process? Did you just start recording foot measurements and then go back home and make them? How did that work for you?
Yeah, it was all concave, horseshoes, purely measure and remember. That was one of the hardest things. But I tell you what, your brain drills it in very quickly. So much so that a customer would walk a horse at 20 yards past me and say, "Oh, we're doing this one next week. Do you want to measure it?" I said, "I already have. I'll see you next week." I knew that it was 12 1/4 inches in front and 12 behind.
Right.
And I knew the shape of the feet.
Right.
And it just like, boom, it develops another skill set. And I always remember going back to that. But it was concave shoes, and you would adjust them. And as you're adjusting them on site, you'd remember for the next time. So you become a bit of a computer. So you remember the feet. I always remember Colin doing a clinic for us one day. And I was making a set of horseshoes after the clinic he did. And I put them on the floor. And he walked past. He was in his mid-60s then. He looked over his glasses at the shoes on the floor. He didn't pick them up. And he looked down at them and he said, "Coloured horse, is he?" And I looked at him. I said, "Yeah, he is a coloured horse, Colin." He's like, "Yeah, I thought so." Because it was a cob. It was this coloured cob. And they got a particular shaped foot. And he looked down at and he knew it was a coloured horse. How many people could look at a set of shoes and go, "Coloured, is he?"
No kidding.
Just a paint horse. It was an English cob, paint horse. And he knew, and that you just see it.
That would have been a compliment to you too, because the fact that he could tell that from the shoes you had made.
Yeah, so then it was taking shape. But yeah, it was just day in and day out. I only did shoemaking. One thing it didn't do for me, there is a sacrifice to making shoes, and that is the money. I made shoes for about 7 years, didn't earn a huge amount of money. I could have shod 50 horses a week being in England, but I wanted to understand more than I wanted more.
Right.
And I had a good living, and I kept my family, and there wasn't a lot of savings, I was investing in me. You can't have it both. I learned a little bit later in life that there's only two ways of doing farriery. You're either on your own and you charge good money and do less and last longer, or you get 2 vans on the road, get apprentices, and do 120 sets a week. There's no in the middle.
Right. Interesting.
There is no in the middle. I've done the in the middle. I've had a lad, I've done 50 sets a week, and then I've got my tax bill and thought, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm doing this.
Right.
You have to earn so much in shoeing for it to make a difference to your life that the middle bit, the tax man in England just keeps you quenched. You can't move forward. After getting $40,000 tax bills, I was like, it just did not. What I was left and the work I was putting in, I suddenly thought, I can't do this. Yeah. It's hard. You're either a team. I know guys that have got bigger rounds, and that's the only way to do it. There's no in the middle. So I realised you charge more, you do less, You earn the money of 35 horses a week and you only do 20.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's how I saw it. And not only that, but horseshoeing prices in England suck.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah, it's too low. It just, you can't believe it, but it is. It sucks. When you're looking at $100, obviously there's more expensive guys in certain areas, but on a generic, it's about £80, 70, 80 is about $100. And with the cost of living in the UK and house prices, it just doesn't match up. And it's never moved forward. It's never moved forward. You can't believe. I mean, I worked it out in the UK that the English farrier price now should be a minimum of £170, which is about $200.
Right.
I worked it out on a percentage over the years, and it's never happened. It's a very weird situation. Whereas America, for most parts, not everywhere, has always been strong in price. I'm here in Kentucky. It's around 200. There's many farriers in Lexington,
right,
and there's many cheap ones, but the majority of them are $200 to $300 a set of shoes, basic.
Right.
They're more advanced guys, but there's a lot of guys like that, and there's many guys around the country that are doing the same. So, yeah, England like that was. So my 25 a week at the time didn't earn me a huge amount of money, but I don't have any regrets on that. You get in the ring and you fit your horseshoes in a contest and you don't go back to the foot more than twice. That all comes from making shoes, the imprint of fitting.
Yeah.
It just becomes instinctive. So, yeah, that's basically that, really.
Now, did you build the shoes at home? I kind of got the impression that you did. You built the shoes at home, or did you build them at the horse?
No, I didn't want to be at the horse very long. So initially, I used to make my shoes in the morning. I'd be in there at 7 o'clock. I'd be out by 10 or about 9:30, and I'd make my 5 or 6 sets and other stuff like that I'd have to do. And then I'd go out and shoe, and I'd be done by 4. And then I'd switched it around to first call was at 7 a.m. I'd be done by 1. I'd be in the forge for 1:30, 2. I'd cut all my metal the night before and write all the names on the shoes and put them on the fire and prep, because I used coal, prep my coal fire, get it ready to be lit for the next day. So I'll go in, light my fire. All my metal was cut. While the fire was getting going, I was cutting the metal for the next day, chalking that up. That would be on the floor, and then I would make my shoes. And I would average, and that when I got to it, I was on 3 heat shoes, set of shoes in 20 minutes, 25 minutes clipped. If that, pony ones, 15 minutes, and then you can get it done. 5 or 6 sets on the floor, go out the next day, very quick to fit. I'd still fit hot, very quick to fit. I'd be in and out of a horse in 35, 40 minutes.
With a full set.
And on the road to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they'd fit. And that's not, you meet guys, oh yeah, I can shoe in 30 minutes and whatever. But I suddenly realised that handmaking shoe, but the customer would, I actually remember, it's never happened to me, but Adrian Devereux, a good friend of mine, farrier, he did the same thing as I did. He's got 10 or 12 years on me, but he made all his shoes early on. We also had Colin, and it was actually Adrian who brought me into that little group with Colin. And it was actually last year I came back to his shop and he was in there shaping some shoes for the next day. And he was saying that this lady had been there, he'd made these bar shoes for this horse. Behind, he put some, because he does the same, he puts machine maids on but knows what to do, and he makes some. And he wasn't there that long. He was there about an hour, but he put these bar shoes on and he'd given her this big bill. She looked at the bill, the invoice, and said, oh, looking at the price, well, it didn't take you long to do it, did it? So that was a bit of sarcasm. So he looked at the lady and he said, well, it's taken me 37 years to shoe that horse. And she looked at him a bit strange. 37 years? Yes, it's taken me 37 years to shoe that horse. He said, and Not all of it was done here. He said, I'd done an hour and 20 minutes before I got here, shaping them up, grinding them up, prepping those bar shoes, drilling your stud holes. And that was a good indicator. So when I used to go to calls and I'd be wrap it up in 35, 40 minutes and you give them the bill, I'm sure some of them would look at it and think, well, it wasn't very long. Yeah, but you didn't see the 30 minutes I did on this horse before I came here. And the thought that went into the shoes and the fact I'd fitted them before I came and the work was done before I came.
No kidding.
And actually making shoes every day is to benefit you guys.
No kidding. Yeah.
And me.
No, it's amazing. I guess it's ignorance, but it feels like a strong word, but how little some clients understand goes into it. And sometimes that's evident when you see a shoeing job that you wouldn't be proud of if it was yours, and you see it and you're like, wow. And the client, their farrier is a god to them. Like they are really impressed with their work and everything else, but
Yeah, that's what
they don't
they know.
Yeah, they don't recognize it, and they don't know what they don't know. So, and unfortunately, sometimes the farrier doesn't know what they don't know either.
No, I know. Yeah.
So even when you were using the keg shoes, would you pre-shape them at home as well?
Well, actually, it's funny you should say that because shoemaking taught me preparation. And when I went over to keg shoes, I then went on to preparing all my keg shoes for the next day. I had it drilled in me. I hate going out to shoe a horse with non-prepped horseshoes. And I think it just comes from spoiling myself with handmaids and everything it just drops on. That keg shoes in their rawest state, you know, they can send shivers down your spine like, oh, here we go. Some people are used to it, but unless they've been in that arena where they prep and make everything, they've never spoiled themselves to be there and to understand what that feels like. So that, yes, I would prep. I've always done it. I would always prep all my machine-made shoes. I would linish them up. They'd all be finished. So I went there, and you're less time at the call you can get from job to job. It's just by spending a couple of hours in the afternoon getting your shoes ready.
Yeah, no kidding. So that has never been a method that I've used, but I can see the benefit of it. There's a gentleman who owns a farrier supply by me, and he always said an hour in the shop saves you more than an hour at the horse, something like that. Like just that if you do it in the shop, you're going to save so much more time on the road. But that was just not the way I was brought up. So I've never tried it, but it's very intriguing to me. I can see the benefit.
You need to remember feet. I mean, you can prep shoes to a degree. You can certainly linish them up and box them up and get that done. But if you can remember feet and understand foot shape, then it's great. But I've always done it. You know, when getting shoeing here is quite slow. I'm the new kid on the block and just want to get a handful here and there. But I'll still do it, even though I've got more time. I'll still prep my shoes. At the moment, I just make some. I'm only doing a handful at the minute, but I make them, and when I get to know the horses, I'll make them for them.
Right. So at what point did you spoke about this earlier, that one of your mentors had said, like, this will eventually get to you. You'll eventually want to stop making handmaids. What got you to that point? What do you think was the deciding factor where you started to do kegs?
It wasn't the body thing. It was competing. I couldn't make all my shoes and compete and practice. And so it's actually competition that I started doing half and half. So it gave me the time to practice. So it was that really. So, I mean, there's guys that have made shoes forever. I don't know whether you like it or not. It's going to get you. At some point, it's going to get you.
It's interesting because there are so many people I know that exactly that has happened, where they did hand make.
Yeah, it's going to get you one way or the other. Yeah, competing. I mean, you know, I gave up shoemaking, but then I took up competing. So you're hard charging, forging. So I couldn't do both. There was one or the other. You know, I'm no doubt going to get wrist problems later on in life and whatever. But if I had carried on making my shoes and said, yeah, I'm just going to make them, I wouldn't have competed as hard as I did.
Right.
And I never would have probably got and done the things that I had done. So you have to weigh it up. When you're a one-man band, you have to make some sacrifice somewhere
Yeah.
in your timing, because it's so physical. It really is. It's an incredible trade, and I've loved it to bits. It breaks the body.
Yep. Nobody gets out alive.
No, but just try and be as comfortable as you can while you are alive.
For sure. One thing I have learned through being more educated in the forging end of things was that there were a lot of things I was doing wrong that were actually causing my body more harm than good. Now, do you think that there are certain aspects of the forging that you found that as well? That your career longevity was probably enhanced by the fact that you were forging and had learned the proper techniques?
Yeah, I think shoemaking taught me to be in the right place on the anvil. It taught me position. So when I did some clinics at home years ago, I would have some guys come to the clinics and they would do a demonstration and they would make their shoes. And no disrespect to them, because they were guys out working and all the rest of it, but they hadn't done their time shoemaking. So when they were making shoes, they looked like they were chopping vegetables. There was no inertia in their body. There was no feeling for the rapport of the anvil face or the horn, or because they hadn't put themselves through that. So if you do something every day, you develop a posture and your body just learns to move around the anvil. And so, their shoes weren't coming out as they want. I said they won't, because you've got to put in the time to develop the inertia in your body and how you present yourself in movement. You've got to do the forging. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, that can cause injuries. And there are some awkward people out there, you see them forging, but they develop their way of how they do things. Everyone's different when they work, I think. And when it comes to horseshoeing is horseshoeing. We're all in the same position. There's no getting out of that one.
Nope.
That is what it is. There's no making that easier. I do believe awkward men make awkward horses. And I know there's awkward horses out there, but I've shod with some guys that you just think, you just need to go around this a different way, really. I think it's just putting the time in, and I think your body figures it out.
I think a lot of forging comes to paying attention too. I think a lot of horseshoeing, and there are certain people, when I talk to them, I can tell that they are constantly, self-criticizing, but also paying attention. And Cody Gregory talks about your eye and your hand catching up to each other and being able to feel and see what you need to in order to get to the next level as far as shoemaking and things like that. And I think what you're saying there, it falls completely in line with that. That makes complete sense. There's times when you first start out and you drive that 4-punch in and you smash the crap out of it because you don't feel the anvil face. You just are trying to drive it into the steel.
Colin Smith once said to me, and it stuck with me for years, he said to me this 27 years ago, he said, boy, he said, Farriery, where you're at now in the beginning, he said, is 90% practical and 10% feel. He said, there'll come a time in your life, if you apply yourself, that it will become 90% feel and 10% practical.
Right.
It will switch. And he's absolutely right. And I don't know when the switch happened.
That was my next question.
But 90% feel is you're going through the motions, but you don't understand it. And the 10% feel is that you're bringing your hammer up and you're putting it down, but there's no feel for it. And then during your career, it switches, and you're then 90% feel and 10% practical. And I remember saying to Colin once, he was making a shoe and he was gliding over the anvil face, and he was coming, it was just very smooth, and his shoe came out. I said, Colin, you make it look so easy. And he looked over his glasses at me and said, it's a bit like watching a swan on a lake. I said, why's that? He said, well, you see me gliding around. He said, but if you ever watched a swan on the lake? I said, yeah. He said, they glide on the surface. He said, but underneath, their legs are going 10 to the dozen. He said, and that's my brain.
Right.
It's the bit you don't see.
Yep. Chris Gregory was doing a demo one time at the school, and somebody said, man, you made that look so easy. And he said, would you be paying to be here if I made it look hard? if it looked like I was
Yeah.
struggling with it. So, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. So you use the concave to fit to feet. Then when you started making the competition shoes, did you ever apply those to horses in your practice, or how did you work those out? Because I know in some of those shoes, there are things that you wouldn't use in your day to day that would make it maybe difficult to apply them to a foot in a competition situation. Did you ever end up doing that kind of stuff? Like, I know guys here who compete who will, if they find a horse, they'll be like, well, this one sort of looks like it needs this bar shoe. Let's give it a shot, just so they have sort of an application before they actually get to a competition.
No, I never did. No, my practice shoes always stayed on the floor. I had piles and piles of the shoes I've thrown away over the years is just insane. But no, I never really put anything on. But I never worried me that I never put them on, because I knew if I had to make it and put it on, I would be able to do it, because my foundation of making shoes taught me that.
Right.
So that never really bothered me. But some guys want to get them on feet because it's money on the floor, and I can see why. I always saw it as an investment in myself. It wasn't about having to get them on feet. It was part of the process. And not only that, on your round, some customers, certain shoes, and it's like anything, you can give yourself the kiss of death. You can make this beautiful pair of shoes you're making for competition, and they fit old Bertie, Mrs. Jones's horse down the road perfectly, because he has bar shoes. You put them on and they love them. Oh, he loves them. He's going so good in them. Then you've got to make those suckers every single
That's
time.
right.
I wasn't falling into that trap. So you get Bertie got, and then what I did on the floor, that's where it stayed. Because I knew when I got busy, I wasn't making Bertie shoes that she wanted. So,
Well, yeah, that is definitely a good point there.
no, I learned that from, when you make shoes day in, and it's not like if you're putting keg shoes on every day, you can make a lovely pair of bar shoes, and I've done it, and you put them on, and yeah, I can do that every time. But at that time, when I was making shoes day in and day out, and I was making bar shoes out of concave, and then if you started doing stuff like that and throwing that in the mix, that just added, like, no, I haven't got time.
Yeah, there are some nights when I think of what I've got to do the next day, and I'm like, oh, those ones are not going to be resettable. And why
Yeah,
did I put
that's
myself
it.
in this corner? Now, back home, were you able to reset much? Or because there's a lot of road work there, right? Like, that's what a lot of the clients do.
There's a lot of road work, yeah. Winter time, get some resets. Summertime, none. Everything's gone.
Wow.
Not always, but most of the time, there's not resets. When I was hand making shoes, I would just save them, put them on, put them in the forge, and put them on the rack. I'd mark in my diary that I had the shoes for the next
Right.
go. So, and I always used to, if I got to a week where I'd had a few resets, especially in the winter, I was getting ready for a contest or something. Suddenly, I had like 14 sets that I haven't got to make the shoes. So then that was like, boom, now I've got time
Right.
to practice. That's what then it's like, okay, I've now got Boomtown. I can get in the afternoon, got 3 afternoons completely free, and I'm practicing.
Right.
So I'd find time like that as well.
And you said you never had a shop of your own. How did that work? Did you just rent a shop?
Yeah, I had Adrian had a forge, a little village forge, actually. He's one of the very few left in the country that on the side of the road in the country. And I just used his place with him.
Oh, cool.
And then he sold it, and I rented it for many years. And then up until I was there for years. I was there for 20 years. And then with the visa fail, I'd given up on my forges, and because I had another one that I used to make all the blocks in and stuff like that. And then Adrian, he had a place at home with a shop on his property, so he let me use that for the last 2 years I was there.
Oh, okay. Cool. Now, I was wondering, what got you started in all of this to begin with? How did you get into shoeing?
Well, my mother had always had horses. I'd grown up with horses. My mum she did a lot of film and TV work with animals, training animals for films and stuff like that. She'd done her stints in the circus with performing horses with Yasmin Smart Circus and stuff like that in the late 70s and the early 80s. So I'd always been around horses and seen that going on. And then I left school. My first passion was to be a stuntman.
Really?
Yeah, that was what I was going to do. we knew the guy who lived around the corner from us called Vic Armstrong, who at that time was in the mid-80s. He was like doubling for Harrison Ford in the Indiana Jones films and all sorts of stuff. I used to be good friends with his son, Bruce. We spend our summers together, and so I was always interested in what Vic was doing. He'd been at Pinewood Studios shooting some indie film, and he'd always come back talking about it. He'd be checking his stunt equipment for the next day to take it around. And anyway, so that I decided what I was going to do. And then my parents, bless them, we didn't have a big financial household. We were, just middle class, and my dad was always struggling for money. And so Vic had said, yeah, I'll take him on as an apprentice, but he's got to do 5 key skills. I can train him, he said, but he's got to do martial arts. He's got to get these certificates in 6 or 7 areas, scuba diving.
Holy jeez.
The list goes on. Rock climbing. It has to be 7 disciplines over 2 years. You have to get the certificates for them. One of them has to be sub-aqua, and there were certain ones that had to be. Once he's done all those, I'll train him, and then he can stay on with me on Stunts Incorporated. But I just couldn't afford the disciplines. Just couldn't afford to.
Yeah, that's a lot.
To run all those disciplines. Yeah, it's too much. So anyway, he said to my mum, is there anything else he wants to do? And he said, well, he has thought about farrier. He said, well, why doesn't he go into farriery? He said, my dad was a farrier. He said, and actually Vic Armstrong's father was Bob Armstrong, and he was a fellow with honours in the 50s, and he was an examiner, and Vic even showed me his father's shoeboard.
Oh, wow.
So that was weird. I mean, later on in years, sort of 10 years ago, he showed me his father's shoeboard. I had no idea his father was a fellow of the company and an examiner. Anyway, he said to my mum, well, if he wants to come back, once he gets on his feet as a farrier, he'll always have a job. And we'll see. Anyway, it never came around. So I took up farriery and
never looked back.
And that was that. I started my apprenticeship, and that's what I did. Yeah.
And what do you think caused you to, you wanted to get your AW fairly shortly after getting your diploma? Was that just a product of the people that you were being mentored by, or was that just your nature?
Yeah, that was the people I was around. Adrian Devereux and Graham Wells. We'd had Colin every month. And Colin was, get your higher exam, get on with it. You can do it early. You had to wait 2 years from qualifying.
Oh, okay.
So I'd done 3, and I took it. I was fresh out of college, really. I still could remember, I was in my books, and so I studied for a year, the syllabus and stuff like that, and the shoes. At that time, the associate you had to do it all on the same, over 2 days. It wasn't done in sections like it is now. So you had to do your written, your live horse, your x-rays, your practical, and your oral. You had to do all your parts, and you had to pass every single part.
Holy.
And if you failed, you had to come back and do the whole thing.
Wow. Right.
Now they do it in sections. So you had to prep the whole deal. So I remember I was absolutely crapping myself, but there was 7 of us on that weekend. Only 2 of us passed it on that block. And it was me and a guy called Stuart Armstrong from Scotland. But that, again, was all about preparation. I did it because the guys around me were doing it, and I just sort of jumped on the same boat. I was like, well, I'll do it then. So we all did it at the same time. And so, yeah, it did help having guys around you wanting to do it.
Yeah, no kidding.
For sure.
And then in the studying and preparation for it, did you do that together, or was that a kind of a solo project for you?
Mainly so, but we would talk to each other on the phone. I would see Adrian every afternoon because it was in his forge, so we would chat every day.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big part of it. You had a sounding board, you had someone to talk to. Yeah, so I would study at home, but I would discuss things with Adrian. And so, yeah, as the year went on, I think we got a lot from each other. But yeah, it was mainly a soul thing.
Okay, gotcha. I was wondering if you wanted to kind of explain your setup with the school and when your courses are going to be running, how people can find you, and just kind of get that information out there so that people can sign up for when your clinics start.
Yeah, so all the clinics are on our website, which is Foreman's Forge. No, I can't remember the name of the website. It's quite new. I think it's Nigel Fennell and formansforge.org. You can see that on there. Also, the Facebook page, Foreman's Tools, Foreman's Forge and Tools. We have the dates. The AFA have got it in their magazine, the supplement magazine for events. Some of the winter ones aren't booked at the minute, so we might revise them and see what people would like. And I think certainly beginning of the year they'll pick up again for April, and we'll see how they do. But we set this up. We have a big shop. I've got all the gas forges and the anvils, and we have a fun time, and I've got some cadaver legs in and stands, and the clinics we did have early in the year were full, and people had a lot of fun. And the other thing, of course, is my wife Susie has got very famous for her cooking. Everyone leaves about 10 pounds heavier. With this experience of the clinics was never just about the clinics. It was about the experience. And it's the experience and the camaraderie of being in an incredible trade. And it was about the friendship. It was about the learning. It's about chatting about our lives. And it's not just about what happened in the shop. That's important. People are paying good money to come and watch me demonstrate and to get feedback. And that's important. But when we stop, we come, we have food, we drink some beer, we have some wine, and we chat about and we get to know each other. And it's more the camaraderie of people are here because they want to learn and create new friendships. So there's more to learning. Just learning's great and I love it, but it's also about getting to know people and creating new friends.
I would hope to at some point be able to come down for one of those myself. So I look forward to it.
This portion of the podcast is called the Stratum Tectorium. These are the short answer, surface stuff questions, but it's okay if the guest wants to go deeper. Enjoy.
Do you have a favorite book?
Oh, actually, I do. And would you believe, it just sprung to my mind, and you're probably going to be thinking of some bestseller somewhere, or it was actually a book written by Richard Branson.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was one of his, as an entrepreneur and a guy starting out and how he developed ideas and he moved forward. And that was actually my favorite. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a Richard Branson. I'm quite interested in some of these guys who you create a kingdom, you create your own successes, whatever that may be. That was his. And that was a very good read. And how he became what he did and the ideas he had and the pitfalls he had and the disasters he had.
Oh, cool. What's your favorite brand of nails?
I guess it's got to be Liberty.
What shoe sizes did you generally have to keep the most stock of?
Oh, wow. We have such a vast array of sizes. Probably 12, sort of 5 1/4, 5 1/2.
Okay. What's your favorite make of rasp?
Favorite make of rasp would be Hella, when they've got no issues.
Yep, that seems to be the caveat when anybody says a rasp that they like. Do you have a Dream Farrier rig, or is it a Dream Farrier shop?
I have the Dream Farrier shop and rig now. I've only waited 32 years to get it.
And then you had to sit and wait 2 years to actually see it.
I bought it's only an old 20-year-old F250 XLT, but it's got a beautiful stonewell on the back. It's old, but it's absolutely great and it's incredible. I mean, I had a basic rig at home. The English are behind on rigs at home, but the Americans have always been amazing at rigs. And I finally got one. She's an older one, but she's the best rig I've ever had. Yeah, incredible. But yeah.
That's awesome. What's your favorite rounding hammer?
I've got two, really. I've Derek Gardner and Stephen Bean's Champion hammer. I do switch between the two.
Okay. What weight are they?
Bean is 2 1/4, and I've got a 2.5 Derek.
Holy gee.
And a 2 pound.
Okay. What is your favorite type of bar stock to work with?
Concave would be 7 8x1/2 concave. That is beautiful concave. And flat stock would probably be inch by 3/8, because you can section it and turn it into whatever you want.
Right. So you said 7/8 by half concave. We haven't really run into that. I haven't seen that size here.
Yeah, I think they do it in England still.
Yeah. Now, and was it so thick just because of how much wear there would be in between chewings?
Yeah, I used to shoot quite a lot of hunters in England. I did a lot of road work.
Okay.
And the beautiful thing about making your shoes, and I learned it very, very quickly, was there's no rules there is to a degree, to the section you put on the foot. You read the foot. I could get 3/4 by half concave on a pony foot.
Yeah.
I swear to God, that was hunting hard. It only had an 11-inch front foot, and I would section it at the ends, put the hunter heels on it. Real sharp stamp, sharp and slim
Right.
for smaller nails. You can switch up concave in different sections for smaller feet, and obviously larger feet can take larger. But 7/8 by half produced a beautiful hunter shoe from 13 inches right up to maybe 14.5 foot of push, but then you'd be getting into inch by half concave. I always make beautiful hunter hinds with it.
Cool. All right. What's your favorite pastime after work?
Chilling out with my wife.
Do you guys have any hobbies that you do together?
No, we don't. We hang out, and she's my soulmate. She totally believes in all the crazy things I'm trying to do.
That's important.
Yeah, she's my best friend, and she's amazing. And we just hang out, and we're just we're living our life, trying to do the right thing, and make our way in America in the right way, and hopefully we'll do it. But no, we just hang out. That is what we do. We spend time. We'll do stuff around the house, and when we're earning a bit more money and things, we've got plans around the house and stuff. So we'll get there. But we just hang out. We enjoy each other's company.
Well, that's important too. What's the next thing on your bucket list?
Oh, crikey. To complete my fellowship, that's going to be a tall order. I'm running out of time to get my paper in, but with everything with COVID and coming to America, and I lost a year, and because I did my practical before I left. So that's going to be a struggle, but that, if it happens, and then I don't know really. I've sort of, things come up, I guess. At the moment, the bucket list is to, I guess, get the green card.
Yeah, well, those are big ones. What was your favorite brand of keg shoe to use? You said that you kept quite a few different ones, didn't you? Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, I did. I used to use there was the Vulcan, the MNC Vulcan shoes. They had it was called a blanking sock quarter clip shoe. It had like an equilibrium toe on it.
Oh, okay.
I used to use those in front of quite a lot of horses because they flatter footed horses, the equilibrium toe, the quarter clips. Those blinking socks were good shoes. Some of the Vulcan shoes. I used to use some of the Arthur Cotton shoes when they were going. Some of their equi shoes. Billy Crothers handmade shoes. Probably the best concave shoes on the market, machine made. I used to use those. I can't remember some of the others, but I've dabbled with a few. Yeah, but they'd be the main three.
Okay. What was your ideal number of horses to shoe all around in one day?
Ideal was 4 or 5,
Okay.
and I could do them well.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite anvil?
My favourite anvil would be my big Peter Wright that I use on at the minute.
Okay. Do you have a favorite inspirational quote?
I guess it comes down to one of them would be when people say to you, what's Plan B? And there is no Plan B. If you believe in Plan B, it means you don't believe in Plan A. So always say there's only a Plan A.
That is a good one.
And I think to accomplish something or attain something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done.
Yeah. Yeah, you already used that earlier, and I like that one. If you were ever stumped on a case or needed backup, who did you call?
Adrian Devereaux.
Yeah.
That's who I'd call.
And did you have a favorite shoe or package for a mystery lameness when the client didn't want to pay for diagnostics and stuff like that? I know that's kind of a vague question, but
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? I could usually read feet, and I've got a lot of success with frog support pads
Yeah.
for the fleshier, flatter feet in England. I've got a lot of maintaining HPA with heels that are being eroded through eating themselves on the back of the shoe, and the middle of the foot falling through the middle of the shoe, and I got a lot of success from that.
Okay. And what would you use as a packer?
A matrix. Robert Eustace at the Laminitis Clinic developed a leather-based matrix that was soaked in his antibacterial formula for feet lotion. And I worked for Robert for a few years at the Laminitis Clinic, and he developed this matrix mainly for onychomycosis or seedy toe disorders to pack it in. And then one day I'd run out of pouring material, which I didn't particularly like, but I'd run out. So I threw some of this matrix in that he'd given me to try. Turns out it was the best packing material for a horse's foot you could ever use, because it was keratin, it was leather, it was soaked in antibacterial. When I went back 5 weeks later, the foot had sweated into the packing. It was fresh. It exfoliated. It didn't retain any sole, and I used that for 10 years.
Huh. Yeah, I find packages like that, if I have a horse that has a little bit of white line, it tends to clear up. Like, I know sometimes with pads, you put a packer in and sometimes the foot can look worse, but I've found with similar products that, yeah, it almost pushes the antibacterial component into the foot, like seeps it in there.
Oh yeah, I'd put plenty in, and the animal would bear weight. It'd squash all the fluid,
Right. Yeah.
come up all the old nail holes, and you have to be careful with these pourings. You know, they can create what I call a dead foot. The foot wasn't designed to be full up all the time.
Right.
That's my belief. You know, it's all right to give it digital support a certain period of time or get the dynamics right, but to constantly fill it up, flush with the shoe like this dead, never believed in that.
Okay. Yeah. What did you use as your diary or planner?
I was a very simple guy. It was a diary that was a diary. I wrote in it, wrote the time down, could see my week, and that's how I do it. And if I ever get back to having a handful of customers, I'll do the same. I don't trust these phones. I'm not that dynamic tech-wise guy that can figure that out.
Now, and this kind of made me think of a question I should have asked you earlier. What made you decide to do the switch from working in the shop? It was originally in the mornings, right? And then you would go out and shoe, or the other way around? But what made you decide to switch it up?
That was because Adrian used to be there in the afternoons making shoes. And then there was another guy called Chris Woodman who shared his forge. They'd be there in the afternoon, and so there was no room for me there to be there.
Gotcha.
So he said, well, if you can do your shoeing, that's why I did it. Until eventually then Chris moved, and then I went to the afternoons, and I was in there with Adrian.
Where then you had your sounding board, and
that's why I did that.
Gotcha. What's your favorite method of soothing aches and pains?
Oh, wow. Soothing aches and pains. Sitting on my porch with an iced tea with some Jim Beam honey in it and having a cigar.
Just what the doctor ordered.
That's as medical as it gets.
So, and that leads right to the next question. What's your favorite drink? Is that your favorite drink?
For now, that's my favorite drink. Yeah. Honey Jim Beam or Jack Daniels and honey and sweet tea.
Okay. Is that a new discovery, or did you have that back home too?
That's a new discovery, yeah. Yeah, I like iced tea. Don't really get it in England. You can make it, but you can't really buy it because they do it here. And I'd have the odd Jim Beam in the evening, and I started throwing it into the iced tea, and it actually goes quite well. So for now, that is my go-to setting.
That's perfect. What's your favorite genre of music?
Oh, wow, I've got many. I think my legendary ones would be the Rolling Stones, AC/DC, Def Leppard, and many, really. You know, but Rolling Stones, I grew up, my dad was an avid Rolling Stones fan, and that's always been a go-to setting of Rolling Stones.
Do you work out?
No.
And did you ever? I imagine you wouldn't have had time. I don't know how you would.
I used to do some prep for Calgary. I used to go to the gym and stuff like that. I think my wife and I were talking about putting something in our, converting our double garage and doing something in there, putting some stuff in there. I used to have weights, and I have dabbled with it, but at the moment I'm on with other stuff. I work out just lifting my welder up. Turning it on.
Yeah. And I guess you kind of answered this earlier. What would you have been if not a farrier?
I would have been a stuntman.
Yeah, I figured that was your answer there. And then I have the COVID question. If you were in lockdown for a month, stuck in your shop with somebody, who would you want to be stuck in your shop with?
Muhammad Ali.
Cool. You do like the inspirational characters.
Yeah, I could chat to that man for hours,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
Huh. Incredible. That's a good answer. Unexpected. It's been an honor. I really have admired you from afar. I'm really happy that you guys kept at that process and made it here. I'm looking forward to being able to get down to your place at some point, and
Thank you.
you're gonna educate a lot of people. And no, it's great having you here. So thank you, and thanks for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.